He walked into that store wearing ripped clothes, a tired face, and the weight of a lifetime of humiliation on his shoulders. People looked at him with disgust, whispering that he didn't belong there. Some even called him a bum. But what no one imagined is that this man, the same man they mocked, was about to change his life and shock every single person who ever doubted him. Because sometimes God hides greatness inside those the world refuses to see. And when the truth about who he really was came out, everyone who laughed at him was left in complete silence. Stay until the end to see the moment that turned his story into a miracle. And don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, share this video, and comment where you're watching from.
They called him a beggar the moment he walked through the gym doors for the first time, carrying that torn backpack that had stayed with him since childhood. Not as a burden, but as a living extension of his own story. The word was thrown with disdain, like someone tossing trash into the wind, expecting it to scatter across the floor. But he refused to let it become a scar. He turned the insult into fuel. Gasoline poured onto the flame already burning fiercely inside his chest. He noticed every sideways glance, every stifled laugh, every impatient gesture from those who believe respect should only be given to people who wear expensive labels. He observed it all with the calm of someone no longer surprised by the world's cruelty. And still, he remained unshaken. Because within him lived a deep, quiet, unbreakable certainty, a conviction no shallow judgment could ever rip away. What no one there knew, what none of those judging eyes could imagine, was that he had spent his whole life being underestimated. Every "you can't," every door slammed in his face, every mocking laugh had shaped him with the precision of a brutal workshop, one that turns fragility into fiber and insecurity into focus. While others judged him by his clothes, he was studying the world, absorbing everything, storing every detail in his memory, then returning to the court to train until his burning fingers throbbed, until his muscles begged for rest, until his own mind betrayed him by whispering it was time to give up. And even so, he kept going. He knew the world is quick to humiliate and slow to recognize effort. That applause only comes when the sweat has already dried and the pain has become routine. He persisted because he understood that the greatest dreams are born in silence, grow in solitude, and blossom precisely when everyone swears you don't stand a chance. There, in that gym filled with voices disguised as laughter, he made a pact with himself. One day he would quiet every single one of them, not with arguments, not with anger, not with revenge, but with the most powerful sound there is, the soft, clean, undeniable swish of the net after a perfect shot, echoing not on just any court, but in the biggest basketball league in the world. And when that day came, no one would dare call him a beggar again. Because finally they would see what he had always known. Greatness isn't worn. It's built. As the years went by, he learned that life is made of doors that close right in front of us, some gently, as if simply inviting us to try again later, and others violently, slamming in our faces as though wanting to cruelly reinforce that we are not good enough in the eyes of those who never carried the weight of our battles. He felt this so many times he lost count. He arrived at basketball tryouts with hope rising in his chest like a timid sun trying to break through dense clouds, but he was dismissed before even getting the chance to touch the ball. All it took was a quick glance from the evaluators for their smiles to twist into disdain. "That one's no good," they murmured among themselves, and he pretended not to hear. But each word fell inside him like a stone, heavy, cold, sinking slowly and painfully into his chest. Still, no matter how much it hurt, something grew within him with every rejection. And it wasn't anger or resentment. It was a wild, untamable, unbreakable courage. A primal strength that turned failure into momentum and humiliation into focus. With every "no," he ran farther. With every mocking laugh, he trained with even more ferocity. With every door that closed, he carved a silent, absolute promise within himself. If they won't let me in through the door, I'll go in through the window. If there's no window, I'll climb the wall. And if there's no wall, I'll build my own path. He understood something many forget. Great stories aren't born from ease, but from scars that one day we learn to use as fuel. While others waited for recognition to begin, he began with nothing. No support, no applause, no praise, and pushed forward with everything he had. With his simple clothes, his enormous dreams, and a heart that never surrendered, he kept going. Step by step, day after day, falling, rising, stumbling, insisting. He advanced toward the impossible, determined to prove to the world that appearance will never outweigh talent, and that humility is not weakness, but the purest and most powerful form of strength a person can carry. It was at one of those tryouts, while they whispered about his worn-out shoes, his almost faded shirt, and an appearance that, for many there, was already reason enough to dismiss him, that he lived the moment that would change everything. When the ball finally found his hands, the world seemed to hold its breath. Time didn't just slow down, it stopped, as if life itself had decided to fall silent to witness what was about to happen. He drew a deep breath, felt the cold floor beneath his feet, heavy like all the defeats he had carried. And in the most intimate echo of his mind, he heard again every time they called him a beggar, every time they said he had no future, every time they tried to convince him, with crooked smiles and impatient glances, that he was nobody. But in that second, something enormous awakened inside him, something ancient, something fierce, something he himself had not yet met. The first dribble came light as a whisper, fluid as water, making even the most arrogant widen their eyes in surprise. The second dribble came with force, with rhythm, with precision. And then he moved, not like someone trying to impress, but like someone who had finally found the exact space where his soul could breathe. Every movement was a silent answer. Every change of pace, a scream he had swallowed his entire life. Every shot, living proof that his pain had finally turned into power. He wasn't just playing basketball. He was rewriting his story in front of everyone who had doubted him. He was showing that character weighs more than brand, that effort outweighs appearance, that true greatness doesn't need permission to shine. It simply does. And on that day, when the whole gym fell into an awed silence, a silence that said more than any applause ever could, he made it clear that no matter how many times they underestimated him, he was there to stay. That was no ordinary moment. It was the prologue of the spectacle that would one day set the NBA on fire. The first major sign of change appeared when he received an invitation that, to many, would mean nothing: to play in an amateur tournament in another city. A discreet championship, almost invisible, the kind where most players show up more out of habit than ambition. But quietly, it was there that stories were born, stories the world would only recognize long after. It was there that, sometimes, destiny whispered to those ready to listen. As soon as he arrived at the gym, he heard the snickers again, the whispers, the cruel comments about his simple appearance. But this time, nothing pierced his heart. He had already moved past the stage of being wounded by empty opinions. Now he carried firmly the awareness of his own worth, a worth sharpened by force, sculpted by pain, proven in sweat. When he stepped onto the court, it was as if he brought with him all the hardness of his journey, and paradoxically, he was lighter than he had ever been. As if, on that floor, he finally stood where he had always belonged. He played with ferocious intensity, razor-sharp intelligence, and a hunger for victory that left opponents, the coach, and even spectators stunned. His dribbles were as fast as thought, his steps as precise as a blade slicing through the air, his shots so accurate they seemed choreographed by destiny itself. It was like watching a rare mix of brutality and poetry. There, every lonely dawn of training made sense. Every tear swallowed in the dark found a voice. Every pain that tried to break him turned into music, into art, into spectacle. By the end of the tournament, even without the outward aura of a star, no shining sneakers, no flashy uniform, nothing beyond the essential, he became the most talked about name. Not for his appearance, not for his clothes, but for the absurd, undeniable talent that no prejudiced gaze could ignore. For the first time, life let slip a clear, almost tangible sign. The turning point was near, and no one would be able to stop it. From that tournament onward, a small opportunity, almost timid, almost silent, began to take shape. A scout who had spent the entire championship watching his every move as if studying a raw treasure was so impressed by his dedication that he decided to bet on the improbable. He recommended his name for a training program reserved only for the brightest rising stars in basketball, a place where few get the chance to enter and even fewer manage to stay. For many talented young players, that invitation would be a golden ticket to a brilliant career. For him, it was more than that. It was the first truly open door after years in which all others had slammed shut, as if trying to push him back to the place the world believed he belonged. But when he arrived at the training center, everything seemed to replay like an old film, one he had watched so many times he knew every line before it was spoken. Venomous comments emerged like predictable echoes. Looks of disdain sliced his skin like cold blades. Judgments far too quick, far too shallow, coming from people who had no idea of the story he carried on his back. Some athletes laughed openly when he walked in with his torn backpack and sneakers patched with tape. "This guy is going to train here?" they mocked, certain they were looking at someone who would crumble at the first sign of difficulty. But what they ignored, what they always ignored, was that environments like that were the perfect ground for him to grow stronger. Where there was doubt, he lit more strength. Where there was mockery, he answered with discipline. Where there was vanity, he found focus. And where there was arrogance, he built silence. The kind of silence that precedes great revelations. In the evaluations, he shone as if merely fulfilling a destiny. In the training sessions, he surpassed limits no one imagined he could reach. Each day, his consistency dismantled another prejudice. His dedication silenced another laugh. And slowly, little by little, something magical happened. The laughter faded. Then came the curious whispers, then the attentive eyes, and finally, almost reluctantly, the eyes filled with admiration. There, surrounded by athletes full of ego, vanity, and freshly purchased expectations, he proved a truth that few understand. Humility also wins. And when it wins in a way so powerful, so undeniable, that no one ever forgets. After months of almost superhuman dedication, the kind of period in which days and nights blur together, when the body begs for rest, but the heart begs for one more repetition, an opportunity that once seemed unreachable finally knocked on his door. An official invitation to participate in an international showcase, a stage where only the truly extraordinary are noticed by NBA scouts. A place where the entire world of basketball narrows to observe those who were truly born to go further. When he opened the email, his hands began to tremble. Not from fear, not from uncertainty, but from something far deeper. The feeling that justice was finally touching his life with its fingertips. It was as if, after years carrying a silent effort no one ever saw, life was whispering softly, "Now it's your turn." He knew that this was the kind of chance capable of changing absolutely everything, but he also knew that he would arrive there the same way he always had, with simple clothes, without ostentation, without brands that shine brighter than the person wearing them. Only this time, none of that hurt him. None of it diminished him. None of it made him shrink. On the contrary, now that simplicity felt almost like armor. He understood that his worth was written in sweat, not in labels, that his name was shaped by history, not by appearance. When he boarded the plane, the first of his life, he felt his heart race in his chest, beating in the same rhythm as his dreams. He looked out the window as the city shrank, as the streets he knew turned into lines, as everything that once tried to limit him faded behind him like a distant sketch. And there, in the sky, with the entire world opening before him, he made a sacred promise. He promised that no matter what happened, he would give his best. Not out of revenge, not to prove anything to the critics, not to answer the ones who laughed or doubted, but in honor of the boy who trained in the rain, who tried again and again, who never asked for applause and kept going anyway. In honor of the boy who believed alone, when no one believed for him. The showcase was far more brutal than he had imagined. It was like stepping into the eye of a hurricane. The best young players on the planet were gathered there. Kids who had trained from an early age in state-of-the-art academies, who had personal coaches, nutritionists, physiologists, and careers mapped out before they were even 10 years old. Each one carried stories of resilience, giant dreams, and skills so sharp that any gym seemed to tremble just watching them warm up. For a brief moment, he felt small. Not because of his simple clothes, not because of his patched-up shoes or the backpack that had become almost a part of his body. He felt small because of the magnitude of that stage, because of that moment that felt larger than life itself, a moment that the boy who used to train on the cracked court would never have believed could be real. But that feeling lasted only seconds. The moment the whistle echoed across the court, everything inside him aligned, like planets falling perfectly into orbit. When he touched the ball, his body remembered. It remembered every lonely dawn, every shot taken under the dim light of a street lamp, every fall no one witnessed, every pain that tried to convince him to quit. It remembered everything that had prepared him for that exact second. And then he played. He played with the intensity of someone who knew this was the moment he had fought for over the years, the instant when everything, absolutely everything, could finally make sense. The scouts who had been watching calmly until then began taking frantic notes. The players who walked around oozing confidence and status started watching him with respect. Some, even with astonishment. He wasn't just competing. He was setting the court on fire. His movements had purpose. His passes had a surgeon's precision. His shots had truth. His game had soul, a soul that shone brighter than any brand ever could. And for the first time in his life, he felt the world begin to see him beyond appearance, beyond mocking smiles, beyond prejudice. What shone there wasn't clothing, or status, or image. It was the greatness that had always lived inside him, finally visible to everyone. When the showcase finally came to an end, he left the gym completely exhausted. Not just physically, but with the kind of exhaustion born from total surrender, the kind that only happens when someone pours everything they are, everything they feel, and everything they carry into a single moment. Even so, his heart beat at a different rhythm, a rare blend of peace, pride, and release. For the first time, he walked without the feeling that something was missing. He knew, with an almost sacred certainty, that he had left his entire soul on that court. He had no idea whether he would be chosen. In truth, no one did. But for the first time in his life, that wasn't what mattered most. The weight of the result no longer crushed him. The judgment of others no longer wounded him, because there, on that wooden floor marked by the sweat of hundreds of players, he had turned pain into performance, humiliation into fuel, judgment into purpose. He had proven to himself that everything he had lived through, from the directionless nights to the training sessions under the rain, had been worth it. Everything had led to that day. As he walked through the parking lot, still trying to process what had happened, he heard footsteps approaching. They were some of the same players who had ignored him on the first day, who laughed at his appearance, who looked down on him as if he were invisible. Except now, something in them had changed. The looks were no longer the same. Where there had been disdain, there was now genuine admiration. Where there had been mockery, there was now absolute respect. The kind that can't be bought, only earned. Some reached out to shake his hand. Others praised his intensity, his game intelligence, his commitment. He thanked them with simplicity, without arrogance, without boasting, because he knew the true impact of all of it wasn't in the compliments, but in the silent transformation that had taken place within him. And in that moment, under the dim lights of the parking lot and the silence after the storm, he understood something profound. Life turns in your favor when you don't give up, even when no one believes. He lifted his head, took a deep breath, and smiled. A light smile from someone who finally recognizes himself. Regardless of the final decision, he knew he had already achieved his greatest victory, the victory over himself. And deep in his chest, something glowed like a spark on the verge of becoming a wildfire. He felt, with the same certainty he felt the first time he ever touched a basketball, that this was only the beginning of something much, much greater. Days later, while he was at home, the improbable happened. The kind of improbable that changes destinies, that tears through the silence of ordinary life like thunder. His phone buzzed, an ordinary vibration, almost discreet, but inside it carried the weight of an entire lifetime. When he answered, he heard a voice he would never forget, firm yet warm, like someone announcing something too great to fit into words. Congratulations. You've been selected to join the NBA development program. For an instant, the world seemed to stop. The noise of the street fell silent. The air vanished from his lungs. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. His eyes filled with tears before he could stop them. And his heart exploded in his chest like it was trying to break free. This wasn't just a sports achievement. It was the validation of a lifetime of silent struggle. It was the final echo, beautiful, powerful, undeniable, of all the no's he had ever swallowed. It was the definitive answer to every person who once called him a beggar because of his simple clothes. To every door slammed violently in his face, to every mocking laugh that tried to extinguish him before he even had the chance to shine. It was the universe finally showing its fair side. That appearance has never been a measure of destiny, that no label defines a future, that the impossible bows before those who keep going, even bleeding, even tired, even alone. And in that moment, with the phone still pressed to his ear and his heart overflowing in a rhythm he had never felt before, everything became clear. Absolutely clear. Painfully beautiful. Every pain had a reason. Every humiliation had a purpose. Every stumble had a function. Everything had served to shape the exact strength, the precise courage, the perfect resilience that would carry him to that moment. True victory, he realized, doesn't come to the strongest, nor to the most talented. It comes to those who remain standing when the world tries to knock them down. It comes to those who persist when no one believes. It comes to those who turn their own story into fuel. And there, in that simple room, with tears falling and a dream finally becoming reality, he understood. That phone call wasn't the end of the battle. It was the beginning of greatness. When he arrived in the United States to begin training, he realized he was about to enter a completely different universe, a world that seemed built for only a few. It was a high-performance environment in its purest form, where every athlete moved as if they carried a natural right to be there. Many had been born into privilege, surrounded by cutting-edge facilities, money from an early age, fame before they had proven anything, and sponsorships that guaranteed absolute comfort. He, on the other hand, arrived with what he had always had: his story, his courage, his silence, and a pair of sneakers marked by endless nights of training on the streets of his hometown. And, as always, some laughed at him. Some whispered. Some judged him for his appearance, his origins, his simplicity, which to them was synonymous with lack. But this time something was different. Unmistakably different. This time he knew exactly who he was, and he knew, with the same certainty, the size of the place he was destined to claim. If before he trained with intensity, now he trained with something that bordered on the supernatural. He absorbed every instruction from the coaches as if each word were another chance to rewrite his life. While many there relied solely on natural talent, comfortable, guaranteed, obvious, he relied on effort. Raw, disciplined, relentless effort, the kind only those who know the sting of being underestimated can transform into fuel. He repeated every movement hundreds of times until it stopped being a gesture and became instinct. He studied the game even when everyone else had already gone to rest. He was the last to leave the court, always. He did what no one else did. He trained after training, studied after class, persisted even after exhaustion. He stayed when everyone left. He pushed when everyone relaxed. He advanced when everyone stopped. He knew the dream was immense, the kind that scares, the kind that knocks down anyone who isn't prepared. But he also knew that in order to reach it, he would have to become bigger than any obstacle, bigger than prejudice, bigger than fear, bigger than the scars of his past. And that is exactly what he began to do. Day after day, step after step, training after training. His determination began to draw attention, first from the coaches, who noticed every detail of his effort, every repetition executed to perfection. Then, from the players, who had initially ignored or underestimated him. In just a few months, he went from being the simple guy who arrived a little out of place to becoming the player no one could stop. His progress was so astonishing, so rapid, and so consistent that many began to wonder where such strength came from. How could someone with so little evolve so much, exceed expectations, and surprise even his own limits? But that was something no one there could ever fully understand. They didn't see the nights he played hungry, when his body begged for rest, and his empty stomach reminded him that nothing would be given for free. They didn't see the days he trained even without money for a bottle of water. They didn't know the weight of being judged since childhood, nor the loneliness of growing up treated as invisible by the entire world. He turned every wound into fuel. Every humiliation became purpose. Every painful memory became motivation to become better than anyone expected. And when the day finally came to play his first official game with the NBA development team, he stepped onto the court differently. Not as someone seeking approval, not as someone trying to prove he deserved to be there, but as someone ready to show in front of everyone that the impossible bows before those who refuse to give up. In that moment, under the arena lights, with his heart steady and his soul burning like never before, he was not just another player. He was living proof that no label imposed by the world is greater than the will to win, that every no received, every look of disdain, every obstacle in his path had been nothing but the fuel needed to ignite his own destiny. And on that court, before all eyes, he became more than an athlete. He became a silent, undeniable example. Greatness is not measured by the beginning, but by the courage to keep going until the end. That first game was a turning point. He started on the bench, as expected, just another name among many, another body ready to be evaluated. But when the coach finally called him, he felt the world stop for a moment, as if all the years of struggle, all the sleepless nights, all the tears and sweat fit into that single second. The gym was packed, the spotlights burned over the shiny court, reflecting both his anxiety and determination. Every voice in his mind, those that tried to break him and those that kept him standing, echoed at once, blending with the sound of the crowd, the snap of the ball, and the referee's whistle. And then, when his feet touched the court, something inside him simply awakened. He dribbled with surgical precision, every step and change of direction measured and perfect. He delivered passes that seemed the work of a veteran, anticipating movements even before the opponents noticed. He defended with a hunger no one there could match, diving every time the ball threatened to escape. And he finished plays with a calm that only someone who trains until their body begs for rest can achieve, drawing cheers, applause, and surprised looks from the stands. Every movement seemed to rewrite the past, as if each sprint, each basket, each dive to the floor silently said, "I fought for this. I deserve to be here." The commentators began to mention him with excitement. Cameras started following him, capturing every gesture, every expression, every burst of talent. People who had never heard his name began to wonder aloud, "Who is this kid?" And it was in that instant, amidst the noise, the adrenaline, the sweat, and the flashes, that he finally understood. It no longer mattered what they had said about his clothes, his humble origins, or his near-impossible chances. What mattered was what he was doing there. And in that moment, he wasn't just playing basketball. He was making history. After that game, his life began to change in ways he had never imagined. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Agents wanted to meet him, brands sought meetings, and coaches began to watch him with a different kind of gaze. No longer the cold, suspicious look that had followed him for years, but a look filled with respect, with genuine admiration. He still wore the same simple clothes, the only ones he owned, but now no one even thought about laughing. Ironically, many of those who had once called him a beggar now extended their hands, trying to get close, as if they had always believed in him. He knew how the world works. When you're down, people judge you. When you rise, they pretend they were always by your side. But he carried no resentment. Life had taught him in the hardest way possible that holding on to hatred only slows the journey. The pain that once weighed on his shoulders now shaped him differently, to be humble in victory and resilient in defeat. Instead of responding with anger, he responded with training. Instead of feeding grudges, he fed focus. Every day of overcoming became fuel. Every obstacle conquered was fuel for the next challenge. He knew the top was still far away, that the journey ahead would demand more sweat, more sleepless nights, more courage than he had ever imagined. But for someone who grew up fighting for scraps, each step gained was a trophy. Each advancement was a silent victory over all the no's the world had imposed on him. And he was willing to climb every one of them, one by one, without haste, without turning aside, without fear. Because those who come from the bottom do not fear heights. They learn from an early age to dream looking at the sky, to lift their eyes, and to believe that the impossible exists only for those who stop halfway. And he would not stop until he reached it. His progression within the NBA program was so impressive that, in a short time, rumors began to surface about a possible opportunity with the main team. Many doubted him. They said he was good, but not good enough. That his story was touching, but professional basketball required something he supposedly didn't have. That talent alone wasn't enough. But once again, he chose silence as his response. The silence of someone who knows they don't need to prove anything with words when they can prove everything with actions. And he continued training with the intensity of someone who understands that every minute counts, every mistake teaches, and every drop of sweat builds. He studied the greatest players, absorbed every detail, every movement, every pattern, perfected his skills, strengthening both body and mind with equal dedication. He knew talent opens doors, but discipline is what keeps those doors wide open. While many relaxed, he advanced. While some thought they were ready, he kept preparing. His mindset was simple yet powerful. Life has tried to stop me so many times, but I'm still here. So I will go all the way. And destiny, which never turns its back on those who persist despite every fall, was about to prove an undeniable truth. No one can extinguish the light of someone born to illuminate their own path, because true brilliance doesn't depend on luck, money, or anyone's approval. True brilliance comes from the courage to continue, even when the whole world tries to knock you down. And he was ready to let the entire world see it. Every dribble, every pass, every shot carried the weight of years of silent struggle. He moved with fluidity, as if his body and mind had been rehearsing this moment forever. Each point scored felt like a stifled scream of all the childhood spent on the streets. Each successful defense, a reminder that no one could erase his story. The crowd erupted with every play. The commentators struggled to find words worthy of the moment, and the veterans, once confident, now watched in stunned silence, finally respecting the boy who seemed born for this instant. But he wasn't playing to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need to. He played for himself. For the boy who dreamed alone, for the rainy and hungry days, for every closed door, every mocking laugh, every word that tried to break him. There, on that vast court, in front of thousands of eyes, he transformed pain into movement, humiliation into confidence, suffering into pure art. When the final whistle blew, the entire arena rose to its feet. Applause, shouts, cameras, flashes, yet nothing could truly capture what had happened. He wasn't just a player who had replaced a starter. He was living proof that determination, courage, and belief in oneself can overcome any obstacle, any doubt, any judgment. On that day, something changed forever. The world could no longer ignore him. The boy from the streets, the one who trained alone through countless nights, the young man who carried his story in a tattered backpack, had finally arrived. And in that moment, he knew. This was only the beginning. Every move he made felt like a direct message to the past. When he sank his first three-point shot, his mind traveled back to those nights of training in the dark, when the only company was the sound of the ball bouncing on the cracked floor. Every point scored was a silent reminder that persistence always wins. When he made his first dunk, he remembered the times people laughed at his dreams, as if ambition were a sin for someone with so little. Every leap, every ounce of strength, was proof that the impossible only exists for those who give up too soon. When he delivered a perfect assist, he thought of the doors that had slammed in his face, the no's he had received, the opportunities that seemed never to come, as if talent could be measured by appearance, as if greatness could be judged by clothes or status. But he knew he could never be measured by any of that. His greatness had always lived within him. He wasn't playing just with skill, but with purpose. A purpose so deep it seemed to resonate in every muscle, every breath, every dribble, Every movement, every gesture retold his story, chapter by chapter, pain by pain, triumph by triumph. It was as if each moment on the court was a silent narrative, impossible to ignore. And the most remarkable part, the crowd noticed. Suddenly, people who had never seen him before began shouting his name, as if recognizing the soul beating behind the uniform. The commentators, who until minutes ago knew nothing about him, started narrating his journey, uncovering the force driving each action. Even the veteran players, accustomed to seeing talents rise and fall, began watching him with silent respect. The kind of respect earned only through hard work, courage, and unwavering faith. That night, the boy in simple clothes once called a beggar was shining in the greatest basketball league in the world, and no one could deny it. Every gaze, every cheer, every memory captured proved a single truth. He had arrived. Not by luck, not by chance, but as someone who never stopped dreaming, and who now made the impossible seem inevitable. After that extraordinary performance, the impossible happened. His name began appearing in headlines as an unexpected phenomenon. Videos of his plays went viral, crossing borders, reaching people who had never set foot on a basketball court. Teams started showing interest, agents competed for a meeting, and for the first time, he received an official offer to join an NBA roster. When he signed the contract, tears ran down his face, not out of surprise, but out of recognition. That piece of paper represented far more than a career. It was justice earned, effort rewarded, courage proven, faith preserved, and perseverance elevated to the impossible. It represented the boy who never gave up, even when the world laughed at his audacity. It represented every painful step, every lonely midnight practice, every humiliation transformed into strength and learning. He had won, not because of luck, not because of privilege, not because anyone handed him shortcuts. He had won because he believed when no one else did. Because he turned every stone into a step, every disdain into momentum, every tear into fuel to keep going. That day, holding the official NBA jersey in his hands, he understood a powerful truth. The world may judge you by your appearance, your clothes, or your origins, but life, destiny, and the strength of an unwavering heart reward those who never stop fighting, who never stop believing, and who, above all, refuse to be defined by the eyes of others. And in that moment, he was not just entering the NBA. He was showing the world that true greatness is born from courage, persistence, and absolute faith in oneself. On the day of his official NBA debut, he entered the arena as if stepping through the doors of his own destiny. The place was packed, flashes cut through the air like exploding stars, and millions watched on television. But amid all that grandeur, he didn't think about fame, the contract, or glory. He thought of the boy who once walked the streets in simple clothes, holding worn-out sneakers as his only treasure, hearing strangers call him a beggar. He thought of the silent tears he had shed, the days he nearly gave in to exhaustion, the moments he believed the world might be right to doubt him, and it was precisely there, in that decisive instant, that he understood the miracle of his own journey. He didn't win despite the hardships. He won because of them. Every humiliation became strength. Every rejection became fuel. Every pain became wisdom. When the ball soared into the air to start the game, he smiled. Not a smile of arrogance, but of deep gratitude. Because now he knew that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to define who you are based on what you wear, what you own, or where you come from. When he scored his first basket in that historic game, he didn't just silence the arena, he silenced the whole world. He proved that greatness doesn't need appearance, it needs courage. He proved that dreams don't depend on status, they depend on soul. He proved that those who once called him a beggar learned in the clearest way possible that when God decides to lift someone, when life decides to honor someone, no human voice can stop it. And so, as the net swayed and the applause thundered, he finally understood something greater than any trophy or contract. His greatest triumph was not playing in the NBA. It was reminding the world that the value of a human being is never in the clothes they wear, but in the greatness of the heart they carry.